Romney continues to pull ahead, and the Republican establishment calls for other candidates to think about dropping out of the race. Will they? I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for the front page.
Now, the magic number is 1144. Can Romney reach that number as things look now?
The answer is he can, but will he on the first vote? It's uncertain. I think there's a very good chance that they might actually have 2 votes or 3 votes.
Joining me in studio, Brian Doherty, senior editor of Reason Magazine, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. Terry, what do you think of Romney's slow but steady progress in the delegate race and what Congressman Paul is talking about, which is a convention where they really are, they're not walking into the convention knowing what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think, I think we're in a position right now where it's possible, but not necessarily likely that we're going to have a brokered convention. But, you got to look at the progress that has been made so far. Romney has been collecting delegates in every contest he's been in. He's got 563, which
even with Santorum's big weekend the other week prior to Illinois, Romney still came out of that week with a bigger lead.
That's right.
He just picks up everything that Guam.
He gets a Guam.
Puerto Rico. He gets. I mean, the organization is so good.
He's organized on the ground. He's got people everywhere, and he's in every contest. Newt Gingrich wasn't in Virginia, wasn't in Ohio, had trouble mustering the organization. So 563 out of the 1,144 needed to win. He's halfway there. He's got
California, New York, all these big states where moderates are generally.
That's it. And he's got twice as many as the others combined. Yeah. So it's going to be tough. I mean, it's quite possible he won't, and he'll have to make some concessions to somebody like Ron Paul on platform or whatever. But
yeah, well, let's go to Brian. I mean, you've written extensively about Ron Paul's chances, and obviously we admit Ron Paul doesn't have enough delegates and is not accumulating them enough to win the nomination. But what power is he accumulating? Because he obviously has a very, very devout and a passionate following. Yeah. That's good to cash in for something. What do you think he'll cash it in for?
He's pursuing, what his people call the delegate strategy, and as you said, it's not going to pay off with a victory. But what he thinks it's going to pay off in is an enormous number of people now in positions of power in the Republican Party on the local precinct, state level, who are Ron Paul people. What a lot of people don't understand about these caucus states is the results that are announced at the end of the day are non-binding straw polls. They don't actually dictate in a caucus state how that state's delegations are going to vote. And Ron Paul's people claim that they have a very good program going in where they're sort of getting their people in disproportionate to their actual number. And you're seeing this, if you're watching the caucus process in states like Missouri and Colorado as they unfold, there's probably something to this, that he is going to go in with more delegates than you're seeing on the news counts right now. Still clearly not enough to win. I think what he's playing, and his people won't say this because, of course, they don't want to say, yeah, we know we're not going to win. That's a terrible thing to say when you're running a campaign. But the game I think they're playing is sort of the Goldwater in 60 game, the game where you have these young, radically anti-state people fighting the existing establishment. It was the Rockefellers then, it's the Romneys now, who are going to shape the party moving forward. They're playing a long game. Gingrich, I think, is actually playing a long game based on the 90s. Santorum is playing a 2016 game. Ron Paul and his people are playing a let's make the Republican Party a more libertarian party in the next 4, 8, 12 years, and I think they are going to succeed at that.
What do you think he'll be doing at in Tampa Bay? Is he going to get a big speech? Do you think he'll possibly get a prominent position in assuming I
doubt all of that, and the reason I doubt it is because my take on the Paulites versus the Republican establishment is that they hate him and his people and what they stand for even more than is apparent in the media, more than is apparent in the fact that Romney and Paul are personally cordial and those sort of things. I don't think the Republican Party in 2012 is ready to give Ron Paul's radicalism anything except maybe a primetime speech, and that's not really worth a lot. I mean, It was worth a lot for Pat Buchanan in '92 for a few reasons. One, because it was pre the era of 24/7 political chatter. It was a bigger deal. B, Pat Buchanan, with his culture war speech, actually was, I think, speaking the secret heart of the GOP rank and file at that time. Ron Paul would basically be slapping the GOP rank and file in the face with whatever he said. So even if he gets that, again, I think it doesn't matter much for this year, but hopefully it shapes the party moving forward.
All right, so Romney seems to be even attracting the support of more and more conservatives who, whether they think he really is believing in what he says in terms of the conservative agenda or just are saying, I think this is the guy who we need to rally around. But the campaign, you know, they had a big victory this week in Illinois, just trounced Santorum, pretty much anointed the next morning as, okay, the inevitability becomes more inevitable, and then they step in it. Here's Romney advisor Eric Fernstrom on CNN.
Fair to say that John McCain was considerably a more moderate candidate than the ones that Governor Romney faces now. Is there a concern that the pressure from Santorum and Gingrich might force the governor to tack so far to the right it would hurt him with moderate voters in the general election?
Well, I think you hit a reset button for the fall campaign. Everything changes. It's almost like an Etch-a-Sketch. You can kind of shake it up and we start all over again.
And fired, right? Right? Terry, I mean, we talked about this before we started. You know, none of us here are advocating or not advocating for Romney, but that has to be one of the stupidest things an advisor could possibly say the morning after a huge victory. Why can't he just say, like, well, we believe in our ideas, and we'll communicate those ideas? Like, I'm not a political advisor. I'm not a PR guy. I could come up with that sentence like that. What's he doing? Yeah, and now they're just getting killed.
I think he was inadvertently being honest there. He got caught being honest on TV, and it'll live forever. You know, the problem is, you know, that is the pattern for both parties. I mean, you run to your party's extreme during the primaries to get the red meat voters all excited, and then during the general election, because you want to get the center vote and the moderates and the independents, you run a little bit more towards the moderate side of things. And you know, I'm certainly going to expect Romney to do that because I think that's what he is, pretty much a moderate. He has made some very good speeches recently in which he's talked about freedom and economic freedom, and I very greatly appreciate those. But I don't think anybody in the Republican Party really thinks of him as a fire-breathing conservative or right-winger. He's pretty much a you know, a moderate. A liberal. He's a moderate who's going to be fighting the Etch-a-Sketch metaphor between now and November. Brian, one of the issues underlying here, the whole primary process, is how much money Romney has been able to use to beat up his opponents. The so-called super PAC, Restore Our Future, has spent something like $32 million like bashing Gingrich and Santorum. Is there any issue here? Senator McCain, of course, is a big advocate of campaign finance reform, thinks this is horrible, that the Supreme Court decision in that regard was a disaster. What do you think in terms of the money? Because Romney's people say, hey, look, we get more money because people believe we should be president. What's wrong with that? We use that money to make that case. What do you think of that underlying?
I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think, especially in a nation with the First Amendment, that any law that actually dictates how anyone, whether organized as a corporation or an individual or a union or whatever, how they're allowed to spend their money to advocate politics, there shouldn't be any regulations on that. And you know, I'm sort of being slapped in the face with my own beliefs here because I think it's horrible on one level that $32 million is being spent to promote Mitt Romney, who I don't like, but of course that's the way it has to be. And I'll also say that in my judgment, what the politicos call earned media is a lot more important than paid media. I think people's opinions about politics are shaped far more by what's actually on the news and in the newspapers than a 30-second or 1-minute political ad. I don't think that the fact that he's had $32 million worth of attack ads have done much to get him where he is today. I think it's that he was anointed as the only guy who could win from the beginning, and even that really didn't do much for him. He's been clawing his way the whole time. So more money, good, even when it does things that I'm not happy happen.
Terry, I'll give you the last word on Newt Gingrich, who's had such an interesting trip here, starting out sort of like, huh, really, you're going to run? And then early on, disaster, and then like Phoenix, from the just amazing, and then crash, then rise, and now seems to be completely nowhere. Where do you think he goes from here?
Home. I don't think he really has a big,
that's front page.
big chance. You know, he's brought a lot of life to this race, and he's certainly a guy with a lot of ideas. Not all of them entirely screwed down, but he's brought a lot to this whole thing. But Sheldon Adelson, I think, is coming to the end of his support of his campaign, and I don't think he's going to be able to garner the kind of breadth of support that he would need to continue and be a serious threat, even in a brokered convention.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. You can find more of Brian's work, of course, by visiting Reason.com, and more of Terry Jones at IBDeditorials.com. For Brian and Terry, I'm Alan Barton. You've been watching Front Page.